smart button was so smart it could tell when a worksite was dangerous.
Hello, thank you for coming to ITPalooza, the 8th annual. Bitcoin is the largest socio-economic experiment the world has ever seen, as they said in the video. My name is Robin Glisser. I've been a tech and executive recruiter here in South Florida for 2 decades. I started my own recruiting firm, Empower Resources, in 2004. Today, we're incorporating blockchain in the sense of smart contracts to make the business more efficient and streamlined, ensure payments and reduce fraud. We've created a subsidiary called Smart Recruiting, Smart Contracts, Smart Recruiting. Let me introduce our panelists. We have Berto Kalvik. Berto is a software development operations executive with 30 years of experience. He's a consultant to SPP42, developing blockchain, AI, and machine learning. He also works at Philips Healthcare in interoperability and interconnected hospital systems. Say hi, Berto. Hi. Cecil John, known as CJ. CJ is an architect, computer scientist, and inventor of the world's first blockchain-enabled records management system. Virtual Developer, his company, has won contracts with some of the largest companies in the world, including Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and IMF. Microsoft assigned them a managed partner status, less than 1% of Microsoft's partners, 650,000 partners, attain a managed partner status. Say hello, CJ.
Hi, everyone.
Next up, we have Jesse Burke. Jesse is the co-owner of Red Sky Alliance Wapak Labs. It's a private cybersecurity intelligence firm. Jesse's background is in computer science and criminal justice. And Jesse's the guy, if you have a crypto wallet get hacked, or if you're a major financial institution and you get hacked, you call Jesse Burke.
Thank you for joining us.
And we have Erica Gemma. Erica, if you've been involved in the crypto community in South Florida, you know Erica. She has run Crypto Mondays in Miami for several years, prior to founding the Blockchain Center Miami. She's very active in bringing community together, educating and inspiring. She works with the city and state government on blockchain legislation, bringing education to school systems, including the primary level, and breeding innovation and technology in South Florida. Say hi.
Hi guys, I hope you can come visit my center one day.
If not, you're available on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Live video.
Lots of videos.
I see.
Okay, so let's gauge our audience so we know how to steer the conversation today. By a show of hands, how many of you today currently play in crypto? Okay. How many of you are actually building technology in crypto? Okay, or blockchain, sorry, blockchain. And how many of your businesses take crypto as payment today? All right, at least we got one.
If you want to accept crypto for payment, let me know.
All right, so we're going to start with questions based on the audience. I'm going to start with each person's interpretation. What is blockchain? Berta?
The blockchain is smart contracting to ensure that everybody is aware of what everybody else is doing, and there's an agreement with the transacting parties in a secure and encrypted way.
CJ?
To me, blockchain is the internet of value. I think blockchain is on 2 key use cases. One is provenance, the ability to show that a record, regardless of what it is, hasn't been tampered with. And the other is actually tokenization of value. So whether that value is a currency, like say crypto, or a commodity like an asset, like say real estate, blockchain can tokenize that. So those are my 2 core focuses of what blockchain is. One, the internet value, the other, the tokenization of value.
And when you go on, please speak a little bit louder so everybody can hear you. Jesse?
So the computer scientist in me wants to give a very simple answer that it's a doubly linked list data structure. But for those of you that don't know what that is, basically it's a immutable ledger where record A points to record B, and record B points back to record A.
So
That's
everything.
blockchain.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Everything they said is correct, but I really like to set this delineation that Bitcoin versus blockchain versus cryptocurrencies are all different things. What you saw on TV was this monetary revolution of Bitcoin, right? The reason why blockchain exists is because Bitcoin was created for this peer-to-peer transfer structure to circumvent banks and to circumvent, the money structures that governments print. Now, blockchain is the Bitcoin blockchain with hosted as open source technology. And then all these software developers from all around the world, they saw the Bitcoin blockchain source code, they said, wow, this is amazing, how can we modify it for our business use cases? And then they created blockchain. So all the possibilities that currently exist within Bitcoin don't exist within all blockchains are different, but everything they said is correct. So I'll just add that piece.
Very good. Okay, so let's get a little bit more technical. Can you each share your use cases or how you're currently using blockchain in your professional work? I can
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
either way.
Go ahead.
Okay, start from the other end.
Okay, so for me, the way that I use it in professional work is very much when it comes to human rights, okay? So I have somebody in Venezuela that works for me. Now, he just had a kid recently, and I was gonna send him, just like $50, congratulations, you had a kid, here's some extra money, I know you live in Venezuela. I'm pretty sure everyone here knows that they're going through hyperinflation right now. So if I was to send him money in USD, the maximum remittance fee that the government would take is 56%. Okay, that's not fair for him or for me, especially not for him. So what I do is I send him Bitcoin, I'm able to pay him instantly, and I don't have a third-party government gouging the money that he's making, or I'm donating to him. So that's one business use case that I use it for, is just paying people and losing these capital controls that are currently set for us.
Jesse?
So I also have a payment use case. I have several use cases, being a ex-chief blockchain developer, but I would prefer not to discuss that venture. And I'm going to talk about my information security use cases, which consist of paying ransomware on behalf of clients. We had a Fortune 100 oil company that was hit with ransomware. It spread into their backups, and they were unable to handle it internally. They attempted to handle it internally with a $40 million a day operations loss. It went 3 days before it got to the board and we got called in. The ransom was only for $700,000 in Bitcoin, and it interrupted over $100 million worth of business operations. So that's one of my examples.
They always want to pay after they get hacked, right? CJ?
I have a couple of use cases I want to share. One use case is we built an architecture, a records management system, for blockchain. It basically allows a user to, first we're making a distinction between contract documentation and a smart contract on a private permission measure. Another distinction we're making is between a smart contract in the legal sense of the word, when you're managing rights and obligations, and what is referred to as a distributed application. So we built this on an enterprise management portal, synchronize the contract records with the smart contracts, and we're able to get into Microsoft's commercial catalog as intellectual property. We're extending that into a second use case. We're very interested in applying the idea of personal decentralized data to different industries like medical records or employment credentials. That's a passion of mine. The fact that medical records can be centralized, the user owns the records and can perform analytics on the records. So I have an architecture diagram for that which I can share with you guys later. The third use case, now how many of you guys have seen the TV show on Netflix called Money Heist? I really recommend it. Season 2, episode 8 at the 40-minute mark, 3 minutes. If you don't want to watch the whole show, just watch those 3 minutes. I think it's really, really pertinent to what's happening in the era of blockchain. Basically, as a spoiler, close your ears if you don't want to hear. The professor announces that, they go into this bank and they start printing their own money, literally. And they're playing this delay. How long can they stay in there to print as much money as possible? And his defense was, his defense was really, now you call me a thief. But when the governments do it, they're not thieves. They're injecting liquidity. The governments dream up money out of thin air, distribute to the banks, the rich, and money is created through fractional reserve banking. We're not losers, we're doing the same thing, we're printing our own money. When Satoshi Nakamoto created a blockchain and reserved some Bitcoin for himself, in 2017, that was worth $22 billion. He minted his own money. In Brixton, around the world, small communities are actually challenging the notion that only the government can print money, can mint money. In Brixton, London, a community got together and they printed their own local currency. and they agreed amongst themselves to start using it exclusively for the exchange of goods and services. I have a white paper coming out soon, an ebook called Dollar Heist, Why It's Time to Mint Your Own Money. Those are 3 use cases.
Very good. Thank you.
So we also use pretty much for record management system, but in a very different way. In the country of Turkey with SDP42, where it started the company and came over here, there are 3 telecommunications companies. They have about almost 50 million subscribers. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to share their blacklist. Their subscribers who don't pay would default on their payments. What they do is they jump from one telecommunications to another telecommunications company, basically stealing cell phones and other type of internet devices. Also, when a regular paying good customer is paying regularly and they want to shop around, the company A, that is a subscriber going to company B, says, they went to company B, so let me see if I can challenge them and keep that customer. So in order to keep that, what we did is we set up, by the way, in Turkey, there's no credit rating system, so you can't really look up the credit rating and based on that give somebody a credit, unfortunately, in that industry. So these 3 companies have basically got together and said, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to share data? But when we share the data, how are we going to make sure we're not going to, basically infringe on others' customers or each other's toes without knowing? So what we did is we set up a Hyperledger blockchain system where each company have 2 nodes, right? Total of 6 nodes with peer-to-peer dual line networks. And the blacklist is kept in the databases. They can query through a Bitcoin system that we developed that they can do X amount every month. However, they won't know who the blacklist belongs to. They won't know if if they belong to company A or company B. So we mask that. And on the same way, when a good paying customer went to company C and say, I think I like your product, so can I query? And basically, company A, who has that subscriber at that time, it gave that person the freedom to shop.
Very good. So blockchain is still a very nascent technology. I think less than 2% of the world is using crypto right now. So blockchain as an industry is very nascent. How do you envision blockchain changing industries or how business is conducted today? Let's start with CJ.
I mentioned before that I see blockchain as the internet of value. It's basically the exchange of value, the tokenization of value. One of the ways I think is blockchain is fundamentally going to change the world, going to disrupt industries, is through what is called disintermediation. Basically, dislodging the middleman. Let's take a scenario, use case. We're in the age of virtual reality, or augmented reality. Soon, an individual who wants to buy a home will be able to browse, put on their virtual reality goggles, and browse different homes from the comfort of their living room. That gets rid of the realtor. Blockchain smart contracts will allow us to automate the process of checking whether a title deed is valid through provenance, and prove that the record is, it is valid. Loans can be taken. You can pull pay slips. Each step of the way, you're using blockchain, checking the cryptographic hash to make sure that record is valid. So you can see how many different parties to the transaction have been displaced through the smart contract and through automation. So one of the biggest ways blockchain is fundamentally going to change the world is disintermediation. And industries are going to be disrupted.
Right. Which is why, of course, one of the best use cases was logistics and shipping initially, right? Absolutely. Jesse?
So 2 revolutionary use cases which I see coming up in the future. One being blockchain-based authentication. So for example, you have Microsoft NTLM-based authentication, which is connecting to the domain controller in an environment. There are flaws with Kerberos encryption which allow you to position yourself in the man-in-the-middle position. I know because I'm a penetration tester and I love popping domain admin. But with blockchain, the record is immutable, and if it wasn't done through the domain controller and NTLM anymore, but verified through a blockchain record, it eliminates the possibility for man in the middle. So I see blockchain authentication being a huge thorn in penetration testers' sides in the near future as soon as it is adapted. And the second use case is KYC. I think blockchain has really good potential in KYC. A company that I was working with in the past was using semi-anonymous KYC for realty and car rentals. And the way that they did it was they built an ecosystem similar to like an Airbnb, but they listed apartments and vehicles. And they would do so through the blockchain. And it was a very interesting project. There were lawyers involved to do arbitrage. So basically, if somebody rented an apartment and they caused damage to it, the lawyer would then kick off the arbitrage process, and it would basically determine, okay, the person was either at fault of this or not. If they weren't at fault, their identity would remain anonymous. If they were at fault, and they needed to have charges brought against them or civil suit, then the semi-anonymous KYC would release their identity. And so I see systems like this where they're using KYC again, which stands for, I'm sorry, I never said it stands for Know Your Customer. Basically, when you go to the bank and open a business account, they'll take your passport and other identifying information, social, to verify it's you. And with blockchain, you have the ability to conceal this information, but then also expose it if need be in a semi-anonymous way. And I just think that that is going to be huge for so many things beyond just patient records and shipping ledgers and proving serial numbers and fighting anti-counterfeit. There's so many more implications out there for blockchain, and I'm excited.
Very good. Erica?
So when we talk about industries that are going to be disrupted by blockchain, almost any industry that has a middleman that is setting price controls that would be more efficient as a peer-to-peer market is going to get disrupted in the next 10 years. If you look at Bell's Law, if you look at Moore's Law, computer classes, how these things advance, it's kind of just the next step in this evolution, right? But if I want to talk about industries right now, today, that are using this technology, I mean, if I was to ask you, like, who has the most patents on blockchain technology? Anybody?
Let's ask. Who has the most patents in blockchain today? Does anybody know? Any industry, yeah, I guess. Anybody? Take a wild guess.
Answer the right answer.
Yeah. Anything. Nobody?
Just say
So who railed against, let me ask it this way. Who railed against blockchain? Jamie Dimon and Trent.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So in the world of banking, which is, when we talk about blockchain, there's a lot of theoretical use cases. There are some things that are currently being implemented, but in terms of global scale things that are already working, in blockchain, that's Bitcoin, right? So this money structure, this money use of blockchain. Now, if I ask you who has the most patents, it's Fidelity, it's Visa, it's JP Morgan and Chase, right? It's these financial legacy institutions that are using blockchain. I mean, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan. They have their own internal blockchain to help them do internal settlements, right? And so when you look at the financial technology, there has been no real innovation in the back-end system of banks for decades now. So this is the system that people are moving to because it is much more efficient, specifically when it comes to accounting, because you have math running the back-end problems versus humans who may or may not maliciously enter accounting errors, right? So the banking technology, I mean, the banking industry is going to be rocked, not only because people are going to realize, hey, there's a better form of money that's not controlled by governments that I can use, that, you know, I'm allowed to cross borders with, but also because their back-end system is due for an upgrade. And just to continue on that, on the financial system, if we talk about stocks, right? We talk about stocks and bonds and how stocks are represented with the DTCC. If you guys know the Dole Foods problem, right? It's just an old, like, archaic system. And now with blockchain, you guys have probably heard about security tokens and securitization of assets. having fractional ownership of things that we were never able to have fractional ownership before of. What that does, it allows people who are not able to participate in the financial system to now participate. So for me, the big first place that is going to be disrupted and is already being disrupted is in the money that we use and in banking.
Very good. What are the challenges, what are the largest challenges companies are facing to implement blockchain? Who wants to go first?
Regulations.
Regulations?
One word.
Lack of developers.
Definitely. As a recruiter, definitely.
So I want to go back to what industry it also disrupts. I want to just add this, that what my idea is that, as you know, today you have the insurance industry that is basically trying to automate the back office and insurance settlement to prevent fraud. You have Walmart working with IBM to use it in their supply chain. But there's one area that, just like my friend here, I'm very, very passionate about is healthcare, right? So I think one of the biggest area that is going to have an impact, and it's going to impact all of us, right? For me, it's going to definitely, I'm looking forward to, because I'm a middle-aged man, and I'm looking forward to that and getting to that, time of my life where, I'm going to start going to the hospital and getting treatments, right? So in the clinical decision systems, it is going to have a huge, huge impact. And the reason I say that is because what we're seeing today is we're seeing these big companies buying up hospitals all over the place. And you have Baptist, it's a huge hospital health system. You have HCA, you have Tenet, you have Kaiser, right? So when these guys get together, what they're doing is they share information about a certain conditions of the patient. And in order to do that, they must use clinical decision systems that is secure with a blockchain in order to share and also buy in so that the liability is not going to be on one doctor or one specialist. It's going to be on everybody that buys in, that use in that blockchain. So I'm really looking forward to that impact in the healthcare industry. And we hope that as a company as SPP 42, we're going to be part of that.
So let's talk about the history of money. So government has issued money since the 11th century when China first issued a bank note. Central banks have been around for about 350 years. Fiat money started to dominate in the 20th century. Digital money was pretty much conceptualized in 1983, and then it was made popular by the Bitcoin white paper released 11 years ago. What is the future of money?
I'll take that one.
You can take that one.
My name is Goldberg on stage. Okay, so the future of money, right? Money has evolved since the beginning of time. So beforehand, we had the barter system where people were able to trade services for services, goods for services. And then it evolved into money to where there were people who needed to be behind the scenes and regulate the keeping of that. Now, when banks came around, banks were interesting because then people trusted banks to be able to hold their money for them. But as we know, or as some of us may believe, power corrupts, but ultimate power corrupts absolutely, right? And so when you have this system of government, so the reason why, like just a little bit of history, the reason why America was created was because we were separated from Europe, right? I'm sorry, I think it was Great Britain, right, where we left and we came here, but something that was written in the Constitution was that we have a limited government that runs on limited tax revenue, right? Now, when the Federal Reserve was created, which in 1913, which is coincidentally the same time that the income tax was created, because beforehand there was no income tax. So when this happened, you now had a government that was running off of a budget that was no longer limited. So what that opened the door for was people who run for government, they're now no longer incentivized by trying to make the world a better place. They're incentivized by money. And not only that, but as we know, if you have a business that has an unlimited, has very, very deep pockets, you tend to not run efficiently. This is the government system that we have today, right? Now, what's interesting with Bitcoin, and I have to bring it back to Bitcoin, is because Bitcoin is the functional money of blockchain. You have monetary economics, so limited supply, fungible, not going to be duplicatable. There's only one. by economic standards, these certain characteristics of money that makes money good, Bitcoin hits all of these. There's 21 million. There will be a limited supply. If anyone wants to print more, it's impossible, right? Whereas the current system, I mean, the Federal Reserve right now is buying back treasuries to the tune of $60 billion a month, right? So this is currently devaluing our dollar in a way that maybe is not so, it's not so obvious. But if you take a look at Venezuela, hyperinflation is a real thing, and no country is immune from that. If I tell you about like Turkey, so when Trump put sanctions on the Turkish lira last year, the price of Bitcoin, the price of the lira dropped 27% in one day, but the price of Bitcoin jumped up to all-time highs in Turkey. So what this does, it provides a alternative option that's outside of the control of governments when it comes to money. And what's great about it is that you kind of have this like immaculate conception because nobody knows who created Bitcoin, but you can read the open source code, and it's been verified by software developers all over the world that this is accurate and secure.
Very good, thank you. So I'm going to jump to the next question because we're running out of time, unless anybody strongly wants to answer that question. No? Okay. So Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, has been widely known to say that Bitcoin will become the single global currency. Woz, the co-founder of Apple, said that he hopes that to be true. Doesn't necessarily believe it, but he hopes it in an ideal world. Do you believe that there is a digital currency that will become the single or predominant currency? Berta?
I believe so.
JC? CJ, sorry.
No, I don't believe so, because I think we spoke earlier about the single challenge against blockchain. There are very powerful vested interests, whether it's big business or government, that have a vested interest in cryptocurrency clearly. Even establishing a national cryptocurrency is a challenge, but if that's not owned by the powerful structure, how are they going to collect taxes? How are they going to control the flow of money? So I don't see it happening at a national level. I don't see it happening at a global level.
So Satoshi is well known to say that one of the first things that you'll see happen is that the central banks will create a digital currency to back up their fiat. So if you think this, like what's happening in the industry right now, it was a lot of anarchists, whatever array, but there was a lot of anonymity behind it when we had Silk Road, Charlie Shrem, different things like that happen. Now the industry, and much of the industry is really shifting and talking about how important regulatory compliance is. So in my personal opinion, we're going to move into regulatory compliance so that it becomes more adopted, and then eventually it hits Moore's Law where it's evolved, and then it hits that 90-year peak, and they can no longer control it. That's my personal opinion. Jesse?
So on that, I think that the adoption of any one coin is way too early because it's still, the ecosystem is still forming and settling, and then also you have the demonization of Bitcoin in the media and propaganda. And what I mean in that is recently in the headlines there were news articles so well or in favor of unregulated exchanges, and basically they stated that unregulated exchanges are wash trading their own coins and manipulating their transaction volumes and a lot of other things. When in actuality, if you go and take a look at what's occurring, it's exchange arbitrage, and that's no different than the blue-collar stock market and practices between, say, two brokerage firms. So the headline's painting something that, yes, it does say or did occur in like one Vietnamese exchange, and saying this is an example as to what can happen and why all of them need to be regulated. And so I think that until the lobbying, the politics, the pushing of regulations, the whales and the banks throwing around their money to see to it that all the puzzle pieces fall in the right places they want, I don't think we'll see the adoption of one mainstream popular coin, but we'll continue to see a community that is chasing a craze, rather, of altcoins like we're seeing now, until people really understand the difference between each coins and the benefits of having a larger block size, say, and what that means for downloading a full node and being able to run an independent node, which you need because mining is effectively verifying transactions. So there's a lot to it, and a lot of technical and political components we're seeing, which is why we saw the fork between Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, which are all really using the same code base, just changing parameters to how they see it to be best fit for adoption. So there's a lot of interesting things going on again, and until everybody kind of gets more experience, I don't expect to see any one coin adopted.
Erica?
So I think that we are, with the advent of the internet, moving towards an increasingly global world. I mean, there are people who do want a one world government, right? And now when you think about it in terms of, is Bitcoin going to be the one that, the currency that rules all currencies? I don't see Bitcoin eliminating the dollar. Like, I don't see that happening. I don't see eliminating other, like, fiat currencies. What I do see is most fiat currencies becoming digital just because it's much more efficient, and Bitcoin being something that people can choose to use if they want to. Now, let's look at how, let's see how the technology companies, they disrupted the music industry, right? So it completely changed the way that content creators monetize the music that they make. Now you're seeing that same trend with the technology companies disrupting banks. For example, you guys have probably all heard about Facebook's Libra, right? This is a digital currency that has a major chance at mass adoption. Now, when Facebook's Libra came out, you saw, he was like the head of the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, right? So this is the central bank of all central banks. The leader of it came out and he said, we need to have government regulate these technology companies because the banks are worried that these technology companies are going to take over. If Facebook allowed you to send money to your family in India for a fraction of the price that banks do, much quicker, much more transparent, people will use that on ease alone. You just use your Facebook Messenger. So I do think that we're in a new era of money just because money has evolved since the beginning of time. I don't have any bets on what it will be, but I do know that Bitcoin is unique because nobody can force you to use it. There will be currencies that may come along that the government may say, you have to use this currency in order to transact, but it's not going to be Bitcoin.
Very good, thank you. So before we start the Q&A, we'll go ahead and start the giveaway. So if you'll follow the instructions on stage and just go to miamiblockchain.io, you'll be entered to win the grand prize, and then we'll announce after our Q&A session.
So you guys get $5 in BSV, which is a fork of Bitcoin, if you download this miamiblockchain.io.
So we look at the first
Correctly
question.
spelled.
Correctly spelled Miami, yeah.
Oh, jeez. All right, so let's open the question, the floor of questions. Can we step up to the microphone, please?
If you ask a question, you get a shirt, and if you don't like the size, you can trade it outside. And this gentleman here, want to raise your hand? Yeah, he'll give you a shirt.
Anything crypto swag. I have a comment and a question actually. All of you made great points, by the way. So just two things I wanted to ask. Well, one, for larger companies, I work for Royal Caribbean. I can tell you the cruise industry uses big systems for their financials, like SAP, JP.
Yeah.
One of the things that might spur crypto, more widespread crypto adoption, if the software companies would incorporate conversion tables for cryptocurrencies within their systems. Right now, there is no such thing happening. They only have global, like if you're paying in euros or forints or whatever. So that would be a consideration at SAP, JD, and all the major power players there, because then the bigger companies would have an easier use of translating those currencies. Something to think about.
You'll start to see it. One of the major ERPs recently announced something similar to that.
Oh, did they? Okay, great. Then second, the volatility is also what's hampering things. Because right now, as you see, Bitcoin's in the 7,000 range, when it used to be almost going up to 20,000 about 2 years ago. So I kind of wanted to just get a take on what do you feel about the different, and every crypto has a different mission, right? So it makes it for a very complicated world in terms of that. So what are your thoughts on how this is all going to get sorted out? Just kind of seeing in the looking glass a year, 5 years from now.
Who wants to field that one?
It's predicting stuff. Do you want a shirt?
Yeah.
You guys want to take this one? Okay. So I think that if we're doing predictions on how the markets will pan out, if we talk about volatility, right? But if you think about the market cap of all cryptocurrencies right now, it's less than $1 trillion. So Apple hit $1 trillion in valuation. Apple is one company. Although they do provide probably half of the telephones in this room, that's one company. When you talk about the global money system, it's $60 trillion, and Bitcoin and all blockchain cryptocurrencies right now are less than $1 trillion. So when you have, the way that you think about it, math-wise, when you have a denominator that's so small, changes in the numerator will change the fraction or the percentage significantly. So I think in time it will, pass itself out as the understanding, as the adoption grows. But volatility is good for day traders right now. And I mean, it was at 20,000 last year, but it started off at 5 cents. So it's all relative.
Next question?
Hi. Question on patenting on blockchains, blockchain technologies. You said that Chase and I think one of the other legacy banks here.
Yeah, MasterCard, JP Morgan, yeah.
So would you recommend starting a blockchain company outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, I would say most blockchain companies, specifically cryptocurrency blockchain companies that are successful doing crowd funds, doing raises, they don't touch the United States because we have such heavy securities laws here. So most of them are actually, even people who are based in the US, they'll open up outside the US.
And that's going to change as regulation changes. We haven't had a lot of regulation around it, so how do you play by the rules if the rules haven't really been established well?
Well, I mean, the thing is, these big legacy banks and companies have they can pay for lawyers, right? That's the issue. So, I mean, if you're a startup and you want to start something and you're utilizing part piece of their technology that they've already patented, they're going to go after you. So.
Yeah, it's true. But there's a difference, right, between using blockchain, which blockchain is just a technology, it's like a fancy database, right? Mm-hmm. And then using a cryptocurrency or doing an ICO. So there's differences. But using a blockchain technology, that's not something where I feel like you have to wait for regulations. Correct.
Yeah. And two of the countries that are really innovative right now in the area of crypto tokens, I would say, to extend the scope beyond currency into assets and commodities, is Switzerland and Germany.
Also, Malta is good too. I'm an advisor for a company based in Malta.
Except for their political unrest last week.
So it sounds like you guys are recommending some places in the EU at this point.
Sorry. I was going to say I always recommend America.
Well, I mean, some of the regulated landscape, if you're getting into crypto tokens, I would recommend the EU, specifically Switzerland and Germany. There's a good organization called digitalchamber.org, and they're really, really lobbying to, so that the government doesn't stifle innovation. You might want to log on to that URL and have some very, very good documentation as well about regulations covering the different kind of tokens.
Who did you reference?
Digitalchamber.org.
Digital Chamber, yes. That's probably the strongest regulatory association in America right now.
There you go.
By the way, will you show the shirt, Erica?
Oh yeah. SV, this is not Bitcoin Core, but this is Bitcoin SV, which is a fork of Bitcoin. Thanks, Robin, for getting these for us, and you'll get Bitcoin SV if you download that app she's talking about.
And on the back, if you want to know where to use your BSV or earn more BSV, there's basically a directory of some of the cool blockchain companies developing in BSV right now. So at the end of the presentation, we'll have t-shirts for everybody in the room.
Oh, you give away the secret.
I give away the secret now. Next question.
Steve Barkley, JD. My question is more lifestyle question for developers. Since the blockchain and cryptocurrencies use sort of like exotic code languages and they have like handshakes at every point, how would I guess the work-life balance for a young developer change, say a junior developer? How would that be? Is that a difficult, a more difficult path than say React, JavaScript, or what does that look like for developers?
I was going to say Erica should probably answer since she's running an education facility in Miami.
I don't honestly know too much about the development reading side. Like I'm not a developer myself, but in terms of people interacting, it just depends on which blockchain, right? So if you're trying to code in Bitcoin, it's C++. If you're trying to code in Ethereum, which is smart contracts, it's Solidity. So it's significantly easier, but there's just a skill set. But I really think you guys are probably more qualified than me to answer this one.
And she made a very, very good point. It really depends on the platform. But if you already have like a JavaScript background like React, I personally like Ethereum because I do a lot of work in the enterprise. I see Ethereum through the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance getting a lot of adoption, lots of partnerships, Microsoft, MasterCard, all the major players coming together. On that platform specifically, there's two areas I recommend. One is if you look at what is called a distributed application, definitely Solidity. Very well supported, lots of development environments, it's fun to code. If you use Truffle, it's beautiful in terms of being able to write code across the full software lifecycle. I'd also recommend a platform which I think makes a distinction between a smart contract and a distributed application. A lot of people don't make that distinction. I think it's a very pertinent distinction. There's a platform called the Digital Asset Modeling Language, DAML, D-A-M-L. They have a free sandbox. They're signing so many deals. A lot of the stock exchanges around the world, and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, the Australian Stock Exchange, are rebuilding their platforms using DAML, right? And they've signed a deal with Amazon, deal with Google, working on a deal with Microsoft to basically take over the world from a smart contract point of view. DAML is based on Haskell, and it's very lucrative if you pick up those skills.
So just to add to some of that, it really depends what programming language you're already comfortable with. If you're comfortable with Python, you might want to go Ethereum, I believe it's Viper, they may have changed the name of it. Or there's also Solidity, like CJ mentioned, which is kind of like a JavaScript base. Bitcoin script is what I actually prefer because I'm a glutton for punishment, and I really enjoy assembly language coding. It's non-Turing complete, and it evaluates left to right, so you can't do any loops or if-else or logic. It's literally like telling somebody to tie a shoe step by step. Take the lace, extend it, put it over.
I don't think you want that.
It's a deep dive learning experience, and you'll be able to adopt it to other blockchains. But if you want to go more of a higher level with like a JavaScript or something similar to like Ruby, what CJ said, probably Ethereum is a great place to start.
Also look at Hyperledger Go. Hyperledger Go.
Thank you.
As a recruiter, I could say Solidity is probably the most in demand, and I believe that Bscript will be the one with the most growth, my prediction.
You might want to trade it for bigger size.
Yeah, you can trade the size.
You can trade it outside.
All right, next question.
The way ransomware is kind of starting to evolve.
Can you talk into the microphone?
Oh, sure, I'll try that. My network's better. With the way ransomware is starting to evolve, and at the same time, the way cryptocurrency is starting to evolve, I'm a telecom guy, but at the same time, I hear a lot of buzz that it's going to start having more regulations, more eyes on it, because they're afraid that it's going to be starting to be used by elements other than people trying to trade for money. Do you see that yet, or do you see it going down that path where all of a sudden you're finding, you're talking about possibility being used for gun trade, for illegal drugs, or for all kinds of different things in the underworld? And I'm hearing more about that, and that's one of the things the government's saying that's what they want to crack down on.
So, to me, that's the propaganda that's being put out because the people in power are threatened by this system, right? And so when we talk about, let's say, the laundering of illegal things, the number one way that people launder money is through cash, right? Cash is the number one way to do illegal transactions of drugs or anything. Actually, recently, within the last 3 months, there were people who were using Bitcoin to basically prostitution, like human trafficking in India. Huge human trafficking ring was shut down because Bitcoin is anonymous, but it's pseudonymous, right? And so you have companies called Chainalysis. What they do is they analyze the chain, and if you look into their profit book, I think in 2017 it was 95% of their money came from the FBI and CIA. These people that were looking into prosecuting these people that were doing illegal things. So it is anonymous, but if you slip up a little bit, you can get found versus cash, which is relatively untraceable. So it's better than the system that we have now in terms of that.
So to add to that, I operate in the underground, deep and dark web forums looking for threats to my customers, and often I see threat actors or hackers operating in Bitcoin, Monero, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Dogecoin only. They don't touch Zcash as well too. But after the Shadow Brokers, which was a group that stole exploits from the National Security Agency and had an auction, after they messed up using Zcash, they didn't realize that the memo field was just base64 encoded, so they had people paying them and putting in their email, And then researchers like myself went and decoded it and went, oh, cool, look at that, a whole list of people buying illegal stuff. Maybe the FBI is interested in this. So again, what Erica is saying, I think it's more the demonization of the cryptocurrency, and there are only specific cryptocurrencies that are being utilized in the underground despite so many of them being available. You do see high-end attacks though from like more advanced threats where the hack exchanges get private keys and go after lesser altcoins, but those are pretty rare attacks. That's like saying a hacking group is going to hack your bank and do a massive SWIFT transfer out of your bank. It takes some serious skill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you get out?
Sure.
I would take 4 of those t-shirts. I'm good.
We'll have a size 3 on the table at 5. Okay. Has everybody entered or gone to MiamiBlockchain.io and got their ticket? We only have 15. We have more people than 15 in the audience. If you don't have coverage, you can join the Wi-Fi ITPalooza. It's open. We will go ahead and pick a winner.
Anybody having trouble? Hours of trouble? Hours of trouble. You're getting hours of trouble. Anybody let me rephrase that. Anybody having trouble and want help?
I have a question.
Sure.
Why are you asking for the phone number? Why are you asking for the phone number?
Phone number? Where are we asking for a phone number?
The app asks for a phone number.
Oh, Handcash itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my app. I can't answer that. When they originally released the app, they actually didn't. You didn't enter an email or phone number or anything.
That was the. I think he went to the Miami blockchain.
Ah, the Miami. That was it.
It's probably to prevent fraudulent users from signing up or somebody automating mass sign up and getting a bunch of wallet addresses generated.
Okay, I'm gonna pick a winner. Damien, what's our BSC price at on the cool ticker?
Hold on a second. Let me check my little device that's
You win BSB.
$94.43.
All right, we'll give away $100 to make it nice and even. Let's pick a winner. Number 3. Who has number 3 on their phone? All right, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to show you how to transfer the money out.
You don't want a t-shirt, but you want the $100. I see what it is.
I can afford to buy the t-shirt then.
I just want to show how easy this is. Handcash is specific to BSB. Oh, that was not smart. Handcash is specific to BSB. You download the wallet. It's super simple. You probably did it. And what is your pay mail? Oh, I can't do that simple. We moved all the money to money button. Okay. Darn it. So much for the light demo. All right, I'll find you off stage so I can transfer the money over to you. I just need your pay mail address. And then everybody else.
No, here. Here, hold on.
New technologies.
The funds aren't there.
Innovation.
All right, let me pay everybody.
Because it's interesting, because when you think about like your Cash Apps, right? Cash App, Venmo, they've only existed for a short period of time. And those are payment channels just like PayPal. But you're using fiat currencies and you have to trust the government in order to be able to continue to use those. What's interesting about Bitcoin is, actually in the white paper it's written, Bitcoin with uppercase B is the payment channel, Bitcoin lowercase b is the actual money that's being transferred. I wish you used 2 different names, but that's how we did it, so.
That's fine.
It's all right, I'll send it through money button in a moment. Okay, so if you want to continue this conversation, we open a Slack channel, miamiblockchaingroup.slack.com. You can simply click the link on your phone if you went to the website. I want to thank all of our panelists today, Erica, Jesse, CJ, and Ferda. Thank you very much for joining us today. Don't forget your t-shirt outside.